United States Senator Jeff Sessions has represented the people of Alabama in Washington for more than 16 years. Senator Sessions is known throughout the country as a strong advocate for rule of law and an unwavering support of America's men and women in uniform. He believes in limited constitutional government that allows Americans to fulfill their highest dreams. Senator Sessions is the ranking member of the Senate Budget Committee, a role that certainly keeps him busy these days. And in that capacity, he is a leader of efforts to restore the federal government to its proper role. And he works to bring deficits down so that the future generations aren't burdened with crippling debt. Senator Sessions is also a senior member of the Senate Armed Services Committee, which oversees our nation's military, also the Judiciary Committee, and the Environmental and Public Works Committee. Senator Sessions knows the state of Alabama well. He grew up in rural community of Hibbert and attended high school in Camden, Alabama. He worked his way through Huntington College in Montgomery and then received a law degree from the University of Alabama in 1973. Senator Sessions spent several years practicing law before beginning a career in public service. In 1981, Senator Sessions was nominated by President Ronald Reagan to serve as a United States Attorney, a position he held for 12 years. Sessions was elected as Alabama's Attorney General in 1994, and being so popular in this state at that time, 2 years later, he was elected to the United States Senate in 1996. Along the way, he has benefited from the steadfast support of his wonderful wife, Mary. Together, they have 3 married children and 7 grandchildren. We are proud to have him representing us in the Senate, and we are pleased that he can be with us here today. He is truly a unique person and truly one of the great leaders in the free world today. Senator Sessions, thank you for coming back home, and thank you for speaking to us today. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you all. Good. It's super to be with you and be back home in Mobile. I remember we moved in here Mardi Gras Day, 1975, and raised our children here, and this is home. Trust me, I live in Mobile. I have a house in Mobile. I just work in Washington. That's the thing that's kind of important. Somebody said when you've been in Washington so long, you're pulling for the Redskins, you know you've been there too long. But I was kind of a Redskin fan before, so I guess I can't complain. This is a good group. I'm glad you're here. It's a pleasure for me to talk to you. I'm glad you chose this great community for your meeting. And Randy, I know you've worked hard on it, and you and your team here to make it a special event. And energy is such an important issue for the country. There's just no doubt about it. I have to correct Randy about one thing. No, it's 9 grandchildren now. We just had twins last month. So my daughter did, and she's got a 4-year-old, a 2-year-old, and now 2 babies, all girls. So Brother John has got a tough challenge in front of his life. They get forward. Let me just say a few things that, where we are. And maybe we'll have time to ask questions if you'd like. I mean, these issues are so important to me. On the Environment Committee where I serve, I'm the ranking member of the Clean Air Subcommittee that has nuclear issues under it too. And we've been wrestling with those for quite a long time, as you well know. And there are a lot of forces at work in the world. One of the biggest political forces is the climate change, global warming agenda that's losing some of its steam. At least it's losing some of its scientific foundation, and it becomes important for us to ask ourselves how much we can burden the American economy to meet the vision, some chimeras, wild chimeras of some of these visionaries that want to remake the planet at an expense that falls mostly on people who go to work every day and who are struggling to get by. Our economy is muddling along, but it is not growing well. It is not benefiting and has not benefited the average worker. From 2009 till today, average median income in America is down $2,300. That's almost $200 a month. It's like the difference in $4,230 to $40,000 a year. It's a big deal. And then you add to that unnecessarily rising energy prices, and it's just a problem. I've looked at this. How do you improve the economy? Well, you can't do another stimulus bill. First, Congress says no way we'd pass another stimulus bill. The president isn't even really talking about it because we did it and it didn't work. You can't borrow your way out of debt. So that is, we've got about the basic problem there, that we're not going to be able to stimulate by more debt. I would then say what other issues are afoot. One of them is regulation. I believe, let's say it this way, if you want growth in our economy, how do you do it? Where do you get it if you can't borrow money and use that stimulative tactic? Well, less regulation. Regulations that are not necessary, not beneficial, depress the economy, weaken growth, make us less competitive in the world market, and hurt the average guy, either in getting a job, getting a pay raise, or paying for the cost of products at the grocery store. It's bad all around. Another thing we need to do, obviously, and then to accelerate the advantages that we've gained, is more American energy. Energy is a key factor for economic growth. When we go through recruiting in Alabama and all of you throughout the South that recruit business, they want to know what the energy prices are going to be. It's a huge factor. We went through with that with a big steel plant here. And they looked at it hard. It's one of the key decision factors. $4.7 billion invested in this community to establish that plant. And so we need to keep our energy prices low, and we need American energy. It's so far preferable to have American energy than imported energy. Give me a break. So we need to maximize that. And, of course, other things like tax reform and some of those issues will create growth without spending more money and running up debt. Forgive me for talking about debt, but if I were to become chairman of the Budget Committee next year, it is going to be a grim prospect because we got big debt problems, and they're not getting better. We remain on a unsustainable path. The lower deficit's now going to start increasing every year. Last year, the interest on the debt was $227 billion. Highway bills, 50. Aid to education is 100. But Congressional Budget Office and the President, his own people, project that over 10 years from today, on our current course financially, the interest on the debt will be $876 billion. That's more than our Social Security payment is. It's the fastest growing item in the entire deficit. It'll crowd out spending. So we got a challenge. So I would say, in this room, and the issue you're dealing with is the greatest prospect for growth, prosperity to be returned to America without impacting adversely the debt of the United States. So I'm really for you, and I think it's just a big deal. Our electric rates are 50% lower this summer than the Northeast electric rates. That says something. And we need to defend that and maintain that. And people who want to drive up those costs have to justify what they're demanding and the burdens they want to put on the American economy and the American working person, in my opinion. So there are a lot of things we can do. It's difficult for me to overstate the intensity of debate in Washington. Being in the Clean Air Committee and on the Environment Committee, I was on the Energy Committee for a number of years. You just see this thing on a daily basis. And the issue is the CO2 problem, the global warming problem. It just hovers over all the debates. And the whole Keystone Pipeline, that deal blew up at first, and one of their big complaints was you have to heat the oil sands a little bit to get the oil out, and that would emit more CO2. And they seized upon that to start the debate, and the president dug his heels in, and we've gone 6 years. September 19th was 6 years. We've been battling over the Keystone Pipeline. This is North American energy, our best ally in the world, our best trading partner in the world, Canada. Wouldn't we rather buy our energy from Canada than Venezuela? Saudi Arabia, give me a break. And you bring it in, and it's a competitive source of energy that whatever the price of energy is, it's going to be less with Canadian pipeline built than if we don't build it. And if we don't build it, they're going to ship it somewhere else in the world, as you all know. So I just would say to you that gives you an feel. Why not? What is the problem? It's basically the CO2 problem, and the left that's driving this debate in Washington. Well, we've had some good things with the environment, and I got to say that a lot of the people who took some heat fighting for cleaner air and all have done some good things for America. Since 1970 to 2012, aggregate emissions of ozone, particulate matter, carbon monoxide, nitrogen oxide, sulfur dioxide, and lead are down 72%. The U.S. has achieved a 50% reduction in mobile source hazardous air pollution emissions. Anthropogenic mercury emissions have been reduced 58%, and over the same period, our population has increased 50%. So this is a good success, and things are a lot better than a lot of people would like to point out. And as you know, many of you in this world, in this room, that going from 80% success to 95% success costs as much as the first 80% cost. And we just have to ask ourselves, what are we doing here, and how we can make it happen effectively. Now, I'm on the Judiciary Committee, and we've had some of this there, but the Supreme Court ruling on clean air and CO2 was a breathtakingly huge decision. In 1970, Congress passed the Clean Air Act. It said you can't, I'm going to boil it down, I think this is a fair summary. It said you can't emit pollutants. Nobody in 1970 had ever heard of global warming. There was not a prospect out there. Nobody was theorizing CO2 caused climate change at that time. So when Congress passed that law, it had no intention to control anything other than pollutants, which were considered to be NOx and SOx and particulates and mercury and things of that nature. And it was a strong act, and gave the regulatory people too much power, really, truthfully, but it gave them great power to regulate that. So then, after a number of years, it became argued that we have global warming caused by more CO2 emitted into the atmosphere. And so the activists said, aha, CO2 is a pollutant. But you know CO2 is not a pollutant. CO2 is a plant food. We breathe it out. It's odorless and tasteless. It's not a pollutant. So they argued, though, it's making the planet warm, and that the EPA must regulate it because it's a pollutant, and they must regulate pollutants. And by 5-4 in the Supreme Court, they gave the EPA that power. And that was a stunning development, frankly, because Congress has never voted to do that, will never, is not now, and I don't think likely anytime in the foreseeable future ever have the votes or would vote to do that as a matter of law. So all of a sudden, unelected, appointed bureaucrats, bless their hearts, a lot of them are good people, bureaucrats are going to be setting the pollution standards, deciding whether you can have a backyard barbecue grill or not. It's just that simple. And all because of the CO2 rules. It's a constitutional overreach of monumental proportions. They have the power to regulate every molecule of CO2 that's emitted by any business, any family, any person in America. And I don't think that was ever contemplated. And as a lawyer, it just points out to me how we're losing popular control of the government. I mean, how did this happen? Nobody's voted for it. Well, enough of that. That's a... No, go on. Well, how do you fix it? What do you do about it? Well, I guess the next president, who might have a different view, and the next president could slow down the regulatory process, but then again, they could be sued. You really need a change on the Supreme Court, in my opinion. I mean, 5-4, that's all it was, and that's how it all happened. And politically, the American people haven't lost the power to control their government, but it's difficult. The challenges are great, and how you get into that and how we pressure and bring the issue forward is critical. And I guess a lot of it will depend, frankly, on where the science goes with regard to global warming. It's just not living up to the horrendous billing that's been promised for it. I remember we were in Milan, Italy, one of these things in the 90s. Jim Inhofe declared it was a hoax at the time. He was chairman of the committee. And we met with the Russians, and he said, well, some say that it'd be better in Russia if the temperature warmed up a little bit. Ha, ha, ha. You know. But I guess to give us trouble, they voted. They were one of the swing votes, and they voted for all this stuff, which they have no intention to comply with. They just vote for it to get the world people off their back and do a little pandering. Here's some of the things that are happening legislatively. We got the highway bill coming up. It's about the total transportation bill is about $54 billion. We bring in about 38. It's going to be a challenge in that committee. We're going to be working on the waters of the United States issue. If we get a majority in the Congress, I think some progress can be made on that if that goes up. The energy regulations are most significant right now, in my opinion. The Canadian pipeline, if the Republicans get a majority, or if they get close to a majority, could pass. I think, and we could force that issue, although the president would be in a position to veto it if he chooses. But we keep that issue alive, and I think there's a strong feeling in Congress that we need to move forward with the Canadian pipeline, and it symbolizes unwise thinking. It symbolizes an overreach damaging to our economy from virtually no environmental benefit. Fracking, I think that's been, the objection to that has been sort of beaten down. It's been such a fabulous economic advantage for the entire country with lower energy, more American energy, and the communities where it's occurring have received economic benefit of extraordinary amounts. But there's still critics out there. But the science is with us on that, I believe. The president at one point indicated he might do something about opening up Atlantic and Pacific and Alaskan offshore drilling. You had to do a 5-year plan. But in 2009, we had the blowout in the Gulf, and people here remember it, so forth. And so that just went off the agenda. And that's not there. But you probably need to know, if you're interested in this part, the president will be laying out a 5-year plan and on offshore drilling, and it will, as I understand it, it's the equivalent of a rule. So a new president would have to go through a rulemaking process to change it, and I think they want to lock that in before he leaves office. So that's a big issue with regard to the ability of this nation to produce more energy offshore, and it's to be good so much of us in the South that have coastal waters that produce, and that produces economic benefits for us. The nuclear issue is important. I believe you had Commissioner Ostendorf earlier testify. I talked to you. He's testified a number of times before our committee and our subcommittee. He is a great member of the NRC, the Nuclear Regulatory Commission. But we're losing Mr. Apostolakis, who's a physicist, great member, was a risk student before he took the position. We're losing another member. And so they were just 2 members were filled last month, a few weeks ago. I voted against both. Neither had the kind of qualifications I thought should be on the commission. Both have more of an agenda and lack of expertise, and I'm worried about this. We got 5 nuclear plants being built in the world, in the United States today, all in the South. And one of the fears is that if you get started with a plant, regulations are going to come down on your head, prices are going to go up, your project is going to be delayed, and so people are not building nuclear plants. I'm proud of Southern Company that they are. TVA is building, restarting Watts Bar. Nuclear power is fabulous, clean, baseload electricity. I remain absolutely of the view that it is good for America. Natural gas is coming in at great prices today, and I don't think it's going to stay that low forever. And at some point, we need this baseload, clean power that nuclear provides. Well, we've got 100 and something plants. We've closed 5 in the last several years that didn't have to be closed, except for, they were still able to be operated, and they're being closed. So I think that's not good for America. I think we need to be building more, not less. And I'm just worried about where we are with regard to that. There'll be fights in the future, I'm sure, over the NRC Commission spot, but we cannot allow that Nuclear Regulatory Commission to be a commission that destroys nuclear power at this critical time in history, because it's fragile. We don't need to go 5, 6, 8 years without any new nuclear plants being built, losing our entire technological base. It will not be good for the country. And as to Yucca Mountain and storing the waste, the Lord just created that desert just so we could put this stuff in it. What better place in the world could you find than the mountain out in Las Vegas out there that the people want it? But Harry Reid does it. And it's created this battle. And he was hammered. And their advocacy was hammered by a federal judge in a court opinion, a lengthy opinion. They have obstructed the building of that. We've spent billions of dollars on this. We've collected billions of dollars from ratepayers. And we're no closer to where we were than before. It's an absolute outrage. To tell you the truth, my friend Harry knows how I feel about it. I've said worse on the floor of the Senate about it. This is terrible. So now they're talking about qualitative factors as they evaluate plants, and we don't know what that means. So it creates another risk that insiders are worried about. TVA did Brown's Ferry in Alabama. I think it was about $3 or $4 billion that they restarted that reactor with. It was a more favorable time, I'll acknowledge, but they paid for the cost of that plant in 3 or 4 years. They were projecting it would take 7 years to pay for it. and they had, so the idea that nuclear power can't be effective, I think, is not so financially it can be effective. Ozone rule. This is new rule. It's in the works by the administration. We stopped them. They wanted to do it early, and a number of us got letters, and we did work, and so they've gone back to the regular time to do the ozone rule. It's projected to be the most expensive environmental rule, ever of any kind in the United States history. And they're going to do it. He sees this as part of his legacy, and I think will proceed with it relentlessly before he leaves office, and the 5 years will be within that window. So I don't know whether we can influence it or whatever, but we need to influence that as much as possible to make sure it's a rule that does not do unnecessary damage. The Congressional Review Act, we get to vote on big rules, up or down, but who knows the gimmick, the fly in that ointment. Well, the fly in that ointment is the president can veto it. So it'll be his, but I would think if the Republicans took the majority in the Senate, I think Congress would probably vote to block any overreaching ozone rule, but whether I would assume that he would probably veto that. Then you've got the carbon capture requirements that are exceedingly expensive. The technology is not settled sufficiently, in my opinion. They make like it's so easy to do and it's going to be so simple, but I doubt it. I don't think it necessarily will be. Their new rules are going to have the federal government telling the state officials that they must have a 30% reduction in CO2, and that you can do it any number of ways. You can do it through efficiencies or natural gas or renewable energy, but you've got to do this. And it's an incredible federal domination of states through this 5-4 Supreme Court ruling, if you want to know the truth. That's basically the way that came about, that they can dictate this kind of thing. So the president is determined to do that one too, and he'll be in a position to accomplish it before he leaves office, and that will be one of his legacies, and he's going to use his pen as he promised, and we'll try to do that. So that change that rule would take a new president. He would have to go through a rule-making process or sign a new law, and neither one are very easy to do. So it's going to be an important time right now. We do need the best science, because we don't, these things can pay for themselves and be reasonable and work. I am willing to discuss it, but we're not seeing that, frankly, right now. And we know this is going to add to the cost of average American. The president's climate agenda is relentless. They say things that take my breath away. I practiced before federal judges here for 12 years or more in Mobile, and if you went to court and made representations in court like they're making representations to the American people, your judge would have you in jail. I mean, this is President Obama on November 14th of 2012 said, quote, "The temperature around the globe is increasing faster than was predicted 10 years ago." Faster than was predicted. I complained about that. Then he said, but he kept on, May 29th, 2013, last May, quote, "We also know that the climate is warming faster than anybody anticipated 5 or 10 years ago." The climate hadn't warmed in 20 years. I mean, how can they do this? So I examined them on the committee, Miss Gina McCarthy, and said, well, I said, is it warming or not? Well, well, you're the head of EPA. You're imposing billions of dollars of cost on the American people. Are we having more storms, or is the climate increasing more or not? Which there's really no answer. That kind of went viral. actually, because the head of the EPA couldn't answer that question and would not repudiate the president, of course, because he had appointed her. And it was a pretty dicey moment, I thought. Fish and Wildlife guy, Dan Ash, in January of this year, said that examples of more climate changes out there include more, quote, more frequent and severe storms, flooding, droughts, and wildfires, close quote. You probably think that's true. National Science Advisor, the president's top advisor, in February at a briefing this year says, you can certainly expect the president will talk about the connection between the increasing frequency and intensity of droughts and climate change. When he speaks tomorrow, he actually repeatedly talked about the connection between climate change and extreme weather, close quote. Well, I gave him a hard time over that. He finally, the only defense he had that this was, we have severe droughts in drought-prone areas. It's worse in drought-prone areas. All right, but here's what we know. The facts are. The Wall Street Journal this month, an article piece by Dr. Stephen Koonin, the former Obama appointee, who admitted that there's no scientific consensus on how humans influence the climate. The climate models failed to explain past warming, failed to explain the current pause in warming, failed to explain the increase in Antarctic ice, and failed to explain why the sea rise is not accelerated. All I know is they want me to vote that have tremendous cost on Alabama citizens. And they say these climate models show that we're heading to disaster, and we have to act now. This is what the president's own guy said just last week. Dr. Roy Spencer at the University of Alabama, Huntsville, testified last year before our committee, quote, there is little or no observational evidence that severe weather of any type has worsened over the last 30, 50, or 100 years, close quote. So I asked him, do you have science to rebut this? They haven't come up with any science to rebut this. I've challenged him on the floor of the Senate. Do you have science to rebut this? I'd like to see it. Dr. Roger Pilkey, University of Colorado, testified before our committee and stated, quote, it is misleading and just plain incorrect to claim that disasters associated with hurricanes, tornadoes, floods, or droughts have increased on climate timescales either in the United States or globally, close quote. The IPCC has basically acknowledged that. But yet they continue to say that to justify exceeding regulations on the American public. And I think it's a dangerous trend, and the people that will pay the most and be cost the most will be people who go to work every day, people who don't get a job because energy prices have gone up and a business can't expand. They won't make enough sales, they can't make enough widgets, or have to pay more every month for their electricity. So they started a new theme that we had to save in the budget. And the way we were going to save the budget, we were going to spend a lot more money on regulation, and this was going to save us from all these costs that were going to occur in the future. And so Chairman Patty Murray had a budget committee hearing. Look, I want to apologize. There are good people that disagree with me. I know that. Some of y'all probably do. So I'm just going to tell you what I think. You paying me to tell you what I think, I guess. So I will. What we call Dr. Bjorn Lundborg, the Copenhagen consensus guy from Denmark, and he came over and testified. And basically what he said was, climate change has been portrayed as a huge catastrophic catastrophe costing as much as 20% of world GDP. Though brave politicians could counter that at a cost of just 1% of GDP. In other words, if we stood up and did the right thing and taxed our people and regulated our people bravely, we could prevent this catastrophe from occurring. He goes on to say, the reality is just the opposite. We now know that the damage cost will be perhaps 2% of world GDP, whereas climate policies can end up costing more than 11% of GDP. And he had charts that went on at great length about that. So I guess all I'm saying is you need to demand out of your government integrity, good science. They don't want to impose tremendous cost on the American people. We need to know whether or not it's justified. And I have my doubts. Now, I'm growing up in the country, we had the Clark Washington Electric Cooperative has a little thing. I don't know if y'all get the Clark Alabama Living is the name of the magazine, Solar Experiment Update. So they got a solar panel and they set it out there and they clock it how much electricity it produces a month. Apparently they do this, we're doing it every month now. Quote, in the month of July, our solar panel produced 13 kilowatts hours, or about $1.56 worth of electricity. At this rate, it will produce about $19 for the year. 13 kilowatt hours would power an average size electric furnace for about 45 minutes. Well, I don't think solar power is going to fix our energy problem. I just do not think so. But it's not a little bitty matter of debate. It's a big matter. And it's a matter that's so critical because this economy is not moving. Middle-class Americans are hurting. Their wages are down. And to the big guys who say they need more labor, I say, do you not believe in the free market? If we had a shortage of labor, why aren't wages going up, big boy, Mr. Zuckerberg? Wages are going down. So we have a shortage of jobs. And we got to get growth in this economy, and we cannot do it by taxing, regulating this economy more. We have to empower it to reach its fullest potential. And there are a lot of things we need to do, and we can make the environment, continue to make the environment better, safer, and so forth, but we got to be smart about it and not overreach. Thank you all for what you do. We're glad to have you in hometown of Mobile. God bless you.
The floor is open if anyone has any questions for the senator.
Yes, sir.
Senator Sessions, first, thanks for everything you're doing. You're a thoughtful leader up there. I wish we had 99 others in the Senate like you, or at least 50 others. And it goes. This goes exactly to what you were talking about the taxing and regulating. Let's run this out and assume that the Republicans take the Senate and you got the House, and everybody's going to fight as hard as we can to get something reasonable on this carbon rule 111D, but eventually it'll be in final rule form and it'll be in the courts and we'll be fighting there. And utilities will have to start figuring out how we're going to comply, as we're already doing, right, Bill? We're trying to figure this out. And right now, it's hard to change the narrative going on in the media and in America, and it goes something like this. Today, Republican leader so-and-so announced his or her opposition to President Obama's plan to lower harmful carbon pollution. That's what the media says, lower harmful carbon pollution. And we're going to spend a bunch of money trying to educate, but the media is going to keep talking about that. I'm wondering at some point, and maybe this is just a messaging bill, but it changes the debate and it gives Republicans something to be for. I could see you standing up with some legislation that says if the president really cares about lowering carbon emissions, then he should support this legislation because it's been modeled by EPRI, and you get the same reductions in the same time frame that the president contemplates under this regulation. The only loser is the bloated federal government because we're going to accelerate depreciation of all older coal assets and accelerate depreciation of all low-carbon technologies, from nuclear to natural gas to IGCC and solar and wind and electric transportation and electric lawnmowers, all low carbon or no carbon emitting sources. We're going to get the same carbon reductions in the same time frame. The environment wins, the economy wins, the only loser is the federal government. Is there, and at least there is some alternative that puts the other side on the defense. If you really are for it, then support this legislation. Is that something that is being talked about at all?
Well, yes, and that kind of thing is conceivable. I've assumed that we have some sort of global warming. I mean, CO2 sounds like it would have a blanket effect. although it is very odd that we've had a surge in CO2 the last 20 years and the temperature has basically been flat, and sun has a lot to do with that. So I guess I would say to you, other than as a global warming factor, there's no reason to limit CO2. I mean, it's plant food. I got a guy who in his youth worked in Canada in a geodesic dome, and they pump in more carbon dioxide, and they calculate how much better plants grow. You reduce the carbon dioxide, they don't grow as well. I mean, plants do better with more carbon dioxide, so it's not all bad. And so that is going to be a key factor in how we do it. But the momentum that the pro-warming crowd has gotten is powerful, and they're trying to keep it alive. So yes, and we also want to be sensitive and continue to improve the general particulates and pollutants that are emitted. I think we can do better, but I don't want to overreach so that we require huge costs for very little benefit.
Let's thank you so much. Let's give the senator a hand
Thank you, Randy,
again.
for your
Thank you.
friendship. Good.